First up, I'd like to invite Professor Pier Luigi Luisi, Professor Emeritus, ETH at Zurich. I'd like to read a small introduction to Professor Pier Luigi. Professor Pier Luigi received his scientific education at the Scuola Normale Superiore in Pisa, Italy. In 1970, he became professor at the Institute Field Polymer at ETH Zurich, and since 2006, he's part of the biology department of the University of Roma III. As a biochemist, he pioneered an active research in the self-organization of synthetic and biological systems, the origin of life, and semi-synthetic cellular systems, the so-called minimal life. Interested in the interface between science and humanities, in 1985 he founded Cortona Week, legacy to this Todi Week, and participated in 1987 to the foundation of Mind and Life in Dharamsala, India, with Francisco Varela and the Dalai Lama. Put your hands together to welcome Professor Pier Luigi Luisi.
Thank you very much, and I would like to express first my gratitude to the organizer for this very beautiful setting and organization, and for the honor of being here. I am not a mathematician, I am a bioscientist, and the title, it's a little preposterous. I will talk what is life in terms of science. Life is, of course, a subject, a beautiful one also for artists, and there was upon a time in which each waterfall, each spring, each cloud was life. We abandoned this beautiful terrain to remain in science, and I will present in this, non-poetic scenario for a very quick view of this science with the question, what is life? And the first thing, of course, is to say, what is life? And, to realize we are now here at the edge of the, yes. Of the Milky Way in a very uninteresting place, and here there is a little star which we call Sun, and close by there is a little grain of sand that we call Earth with a little water, and as far as we know, life is only limited here. There is no other place for science where life exists. Of course, here is where my struggle as a biochemist begins with my friends, mathematicians, particularly the statistician, where they begin to say, look, there are so many galaxies, and each galaxy contains billions of stars. So if there are billions of stars, of course, there will be millions of places where there is life. And but I am a little cautious with this kind of view. And yes, I realize as a scientist actually that there are many questions we are not able to address, yes, but to tackle with. And you remember the famous, if you look at these billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, and then you think of these mysteries of the dark energy, of the dark matter and infinity, you end up with these very famous and unsolvable questions of Leibniz and Heidegger, why there is something instead of nothing, which I like to present also to my students as one question which science cannot answer, and it's perhaps good so. If you want to answer this question, you have to go into a very personal pathway, and science does not matter any longer. And this is something that came to my mind, thinking of these very many mysteries we are not able to tackle. And once as a boy, I was on my computer and I saw a little ant crossing my television set, actually my computer, and I thought that this ant will never be able to understand the complexity of a television or of my computer. It's something order of magnitude above the capability, the cognitive capability of these things. And then when I look at these pictures, for example, of the little man who goes up to the sky with his little spaceship, I, came to think that there is some kind of analogy. But going back to my friend statistician, and there is no doubt that modern astronomers have discovered several thousand of planets in the so-called habitable zone. And here there are, for example, some of the most famous of these planets, which is the Earth. So they are very comparable, and my friend astronomer claimed that maybe there is some water, and perhaps there is some form of life. And actually, if you look at these data of...
Excuse me, Professor. Can you change the slide, show that side, because your slide...
I should say that?
No, when you change the slide, point there, because slide changes the direction.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. One learns always something new. So this idea that there are as many as 40 billion Earth-sized planets orbiting, and then my friend astronomer, whom I like to struggle often, they say, well, of course, then there are many millions places where there will be life. And here it's the time to mention the Fermi Paradox. When he was confronted with this idea, say, look, there are so many possible other stars and planets, and there will be many, many forms of life. They say, yeah, where are they? The famous Fermi Paradox. And in fact, I think this is not a real serious paradox. The question, where is everybody, can be understood on the basis of some simple mathematical formulation. For having aliens talking with us or having signal with us, you have to have two planets or more planets which are similar in terms of evolution. There is no sense in talking about possible communication between or among planets which are 100 million years away from each other. Remember that 10 million years ago there was no intelligent life on this Earth. So that if you ask the conditions for planets which are similar or have a kind of quasi-simultaneity in terms of cosmic evolution, and also you want that they are at a manageable distance, even considering, the speed of light, you don't find anything. And so this question, where is everybody, maybe they are someplace, but it's impossible for us to talk to them and to know whether they are there. To me, the old question by Monod, are we alone in the universe, does not, I have nothing against this idea. I know that many people don't like it, but I am ready to bet that all these people who say, yes, there is life, this is not a scientific statement, but it's a kind of faith, maybe a beautiful one, alimented by science fiction and our beautiful mind, but in terms of real science, we are still alone in the universe. No problem for me. But now let's go down again and back with the question, what is life in terms of science? Now, for that, let me, I should point here. Yes, let's see the scientific thinking in our age from the last century on. I pass all the kind of mechanistic thinking of Descartes and Newton and Galileo with their mechanistic view according to which the living was a machine and all their analysis was the so-called analytical procedure by which if you have a complex system, you divide this complex system in many simple ones. You take one part, you study the part, the second part, the third part. You put all this information together with the idea, with the hope to get then the truth of the system. But this, in this age, a series of thinkers, mostly independent from one another, like von Neumann and Bateson and Förster and Alan Turing and Wiener, etc., began to formulate new ideas against the mechanistic view, emphasizing holistic complexity, system thinking, and collective properties, nonlinearity, new concept. And the very simple question to start with is this one. You see, it's a simple butterfly, and yes, you can study the wing, which is kind of silky material. You can study the antenna, which is a kind of gelatinous, keratinoid material. The body is gel-like. Yes, many different, but how all these different parts know that they belong to the same entity? This very simple question produce a kind of collapse of the all mechanistic thinking and actually gave rise to this kind of system view. Here my book with Capra, but before us there was von Bertalanffy, with this idea that very important and which is the basis of, I believe, the paradigm of today, is that if you look at a very complex system like, the man formed by so many different parts, and actually to simplify things, let me show the organ, the brain, the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, and these arrows are not the fantasies of my artistic friends who made these slides for me, but they are physiological realities, as the intestine cannot do its own business without having contact with the stomach or the liver, and the heart cannot beat its number of beats independently of all what other organ do. This is like an orchestra where the various players, in order to produce a meaningful, beautiful harmony, have to be in tune with each other. Nobody can do its own business. It's a kind of touching and hearing, and life is this kind of integration of many different things. And of course, there is also, and this can be, can be the different organs, but can be the different cities of a nation, or can be the different nation in our world, can be the different members of a party, which, in order to be one, they have to interact with each other. And if then you begin to cut all these links, you find something that we call death. Death is, you can still have all organs. If here there is a horse which died, is just dead, this dead horse has all proteins, all DNA, all blood, all hormones of the living one. Why do you call it dead? You call it dead because although it has all organs, they are not connected with each other. This is death, which is a picture of fragmentation. Dead is fragmentation, and life is connectivity. Okay, then there will be something to discuss here which I cannot do, because the argument of life versus death will be a very big question, and I have given several dialogue with religious men, and I am a student of the origin of life, and the origin of life has never been a big problem between science and believers. There is many ways to find a hug about that. But in the dichotomy between life and death, between science and religion, there is really a sharp non-communication. For science, once that you die, the individual is lost completely. There are only molecules which can be reshuffled. For religion, with the death of the individual, something stays, which you can call soul, you can call reincarnation, you can call it partly karma. And this probably it's a controversy which will be with us also for the next century or so. Now, this picture, which is very general, brings us to some other question, because this connection, it's also true for my watch. I have different parts which are connected with each other and makes a collective property. It's true for many machines. So what is the difference then between a machine, which also consists of many interactive parts in an intelligent way, intelligent in quotation mark, and a living system? This would bring me to the theory of autopoiesis, which for me is the only sensible way to approach the question, what is life? Which is not the question of the origin of life, This is already life done, and I want to see what is life once life is already there. And then let's see where life has its simplest possible way, which is at the level of microbe, which are a fraction of millimeters, but they're of course alive. Actually, the biomass of microbe is much larger than the biomass of mankind on this earth. And this is the representation of a cell where you have the semi-permeable membranes which lets some nutrient go inside, some catabolites goes away, and inside there are many, many transformations. You see, each of your liver cell contains now maybe 10,000 chemical reaction, a sugar being burned, a vitamin being synthesized, proteins being hydrolyzed, and ATP being burned or formed. But if you look at your liver cell under the microscope, you see that the liver cell remains a liver cell. And so this is a kind of first paradox, because we have all this change and transformation, millions of them within a few minutes, and still you have the maintenance of the same structure. You have the continuity. And this is indeed the most salient characteristic of biological life on our planet. The cell main activity is to maintain its own identity. I want to stay what I am, despite the fact that there are thousands of chemical transformations inside it. How is this paradox possible? Maintenance and transformation. It's possible because the cell remakes from the inside, thanks to energy and food from the outside, all what is being transformed away. The cell, but also man, also the elephant, is a factory that remakes itself from within. You know that your hemoglobin, also mine, is going to be destroyed in a few days, but is remade from the inside, and I shave every morning, and the beard grows from inside. And you also know that your cells are going to be dead, destroyed, within a couple of months, 97%, but they are remade from the inside. So life for us is a factory which obeys this principle of self-maintenance from within due to dynamic network of reaction which are defined and constructed by the system itself. And Maturana and Varela, the author of this theory of autopoiesis, say living systems transform inside themselves matter in such a way that the product, what is the product, is their own organization. And the living cell then is defined by its organization, and therefore must be interpreted in terms of relations among the components, rather in terms of the property of components. Forget the idea that life equals DNA. This is one of the most stupid blasphemy of the news. DNA is very important, very beautiful molecule, but it's just one of, water is equally important, proteins are equally important, ATP and energy. And if you look at the internal with the loop of biochemists inside the cell, this little microbe we have seen before you may be appalled by the complexity you see. This is called metabolic map of part of Escherichia coli, which is the microbe that you find in our gut. And each point is a chemical compound. Each line is a chemical transformation, catalyzed, as we say in chemistry, made possible at room temperature by a protein which is specific for this reaction. So this means that we have here 1,000 of different proteins which catalyze all this reaction. And if you ask, yes, but where is the beginning? Where is the end? Well, there is no beginning, no end. The question is that life is the web of interactions, of all these interactions together. Cellular life is a global distributed quality, is not due to any particular center, is due to the mutual interaction of parts which are independent from each other. And of course there is the interaction with the environment, and here you see the amoeba, or maybe it's the elephant, which eats whatever it has around to survive, and these things which it takes are of course part of his life. And the authors use a very strong word for that. The organism creates from the environment its own world. A strong word. We come back there. But look, this is a spider which, with odds and pieces they find around, constructed his world, but this world then is what makes him living. There is one arrow going this way and one arrow going this way. Is the living and the environment are just one entity. And the same with this termite. You can take also ant nest or many other beaver kind of, or you can take this example that you know very well, where there are these little animals who have built their churches, their avenue, their schools, and this construction is what permits their life essence. So you see this double binding between life and environment, and with this then final point that life is not only this autopoietic, this living cell, but you have to consider the environment, and with this capability of recognizing and interact specifically with your own environment. And this is called, according to the author, cognition. And defined in this way that each organism interacts with the environment in a special way. The fish has the water and has to interact with the tools provided to him by evolution to be a fish. The earthworm has its own physiological tools to recognize and be happy with the earth, and the bird likewise. And so all what is living is cognitive. Also bacteria, they say, are cognitive. And here is a difficult point, but they don't know it. And here a brief excursion. I'll take you with me in 2 minutes to a temple in Bhutan, in Thimphu, where I had the occasion of teaching to a class of Buddhist nuns. Rima gave something to do. And here when I said that these microbes are cognitive, but they don't know it, there was, in these very quiet, nice nuns, there was a surge of protest, and their protest is in this expression. You say bacteria are living, but have no mind. Nonsense, according to them. And here we started a long discussion, which I may start with you. Do bacteria, does a lizard know to be a lizard? And here the question becomes very intricate and complex, but for them, since bacteria have an intentionality, they move in a sugar gradient to get food. Then if they have an intentionality, they have mind. If they have mind, they have consciousness. And I say, the usual thing that a scientist like me should say, I say, look, the amoeba does not know anything about sugar and gradient. This is the projection of the mind of the scientist who sees the amoeba moving in a gradient of sugar, and this science projected this is intention to get food, but it's just the amoeba is just a kind of little genetic machine who is rich of cognition, does know what it has to do, but does not know that it is doing it. But there was no way to convince them, and maybe there is no way to convince some of you. The question, does a lizard know to be a lizard, is probably a very hard one, and we have no time for that. If you have time in the weekend, you can go up there and 3,000 meters. I got sick, but you're probably stronger and wiser than me. Now, these things, and I want to take 2 minutes to interpret the same using a different language, the language of Buddhism, since we are talking about spirituality. I say, instead of saying chemistry, I said each compound here is dependent on the previous one, and if you look around, there is no one who has an intrinsic independence. There is no one which is provided with a kind of prima causa, which is provided with being without a causality. And it's the same as I said before, but the language is quite different, and again points to the fact that there is no prima causa, there is no origin, and this causality, that this depend on that, as you know, is the basic notion of Lord Buddha when he said, if there is this, there is that. If there is that, if there is not that, then there is not this. Implying not only linear causality, but a codependent arising, as, here, this is not caused by this alone, but is caused by all others, which conjure up to make that particular compound. And if you consider the cumulative effect of this codependent arising, and the other important principle of Buddhism, the impermanence, these compounds that you have seen in the metabolic map exist for only microsecond, and disappear, but then they are remade, but each of them does not stay there for more than, very little time. So impermanence being the main characteristic, and if all things are mutually linked and causally interdependent, at the same time continuously change, here comes the picture of the world. Then the entire universe is not made by isolated, independent things, but is a dynamic, totally interactive process. Here would be proper to make an analogy with Advaita, Vedanta, and Indian point of view, but here I want to make a different, smaller things, that if it is true that Buddhism sees reality as a web of causal interaction, so that you have a dynamic, gigantic network, then the same can be said. You remember my picture with all these organs connected with each other. This organ can be also the planets, can be, anything. To make a tree, you need the seed, but you need the farmer, you need the water, you need the sun, and if you need the sun, then you don't want too much clouds. If you consider the clouds, and it goes on and consider the whole creation. So that in first approximation, could see that there is a similarity between this view of system thinking, that all parts are connected with each other, and there is no single part which stands by itself. You can consider the liver by itself, but the liver is not living, so if you want life, you have to consider the liver together with all the other elements. But, as I said here, the picture of totality, which is common to the scientific paradigm of system thinking and Buddhist and also Advaita Vedanta view, is only superficial, in the sense that science and also the system thinking is a dual thinking. There is me looking at the world, and what the spiritual seeker is trying to do, the real one, is just to go away with this duality. And here again the question of science against spirituality. I don't like the expression science and spirituality. To me, spirituality is something that pertains to the scientist, which is something different from science, which is, a plethora of very different things and very different paradigm. But the two things here are quite different from each other. So in fact, the question, can scientists be spiritual? So I don't say, can science be spiritual, because I don't like the question, but can scientists be spiritual? Yes, by all means. If you do your own pathway, towards the enlightenment or what you want to do, call it, of course you can be a spiritual seeking person. In general, when we say that Einstein was a spiritual scientist, we mean something completely different. Einstein or even Schrödinger were in a way in the framework of duality, one and the world. And Einstein, we call him spiritual because of this very beautiful expression. One cannot help but be naive when contemplating the scientific, the mysteries of eternity. This Ave, a beautiful word in English to express marvel, but also a little fear, in front of the mystery that we were mentioning at the very beginning. And I want to finish going to this guy who existed some million years before Einstein, as according to our narrative, and particularly the narrative of Christian religion, this is the only animal provided by consciousness. Consciousness is something that can be defined in many different ways. One of the ways is the Christian definition, the capability of discriminating between the good and the evil, which is not the definition of the scholars who study consciousness, but even in this narrow perspective of this discriminating the... Yes, I finish. Perfect timing. Then discriminating the good from the evil, see what we have done in the last only something less than 50 years. We have destroyed 1/2 of the earth forest. We have inserted a lot of CO2. Now we are at 400 ppm, with an increase of temperature of 0.6, which can go up to 2, which is an utopia. We'll certainly go to 2.5. Then much land once good for cultivation is no longer good, and the loss of biodiversity and nuclear waste, and the fact that 1/3 of the world population, despite all this cry of the various governments, more appeal, more growth, they live in poverty. And this is again a kind of, system thinking where the crazy consumption of energy produce, of course, pollution, which produce global warming, which produce the climate disaster, biodiversity loss, and migration, social, and this is a kind of negative kind of thinking. And the question whether there is any hope for the future, I don't know, but we can use the word full of hope of this friend of ours, whom we have already met, who wrote about 50 years ago, a human being is a part of a whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thought and feeling as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. The delusion is a kind of prison for us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creature and the all of nature in its beauty. My generation was not able to do so. We hope that the young people who are here are able to do it in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. I hope in near future, next generation will definitely gonna care about that. Thank you very much once.